got the promotion. He loved it in a Toro Rosso, but he jumped in the Red Bull car and he struggled for the first few races, and they had to drop him again. And so, every person's different. They're all obviously, most of them, 99% of them, they're on their merit, but they certainly do struggle if they jump in someone else's car, or they jump in a car that doesn't suit where they're sitting in the construction at the time.
Yep. And Barry Rogers has increased his shareholding in ARG to 75%, and it's good evening to Box.
While you're flipping through Box, and evening Triple B.
Yep.
And while you flip through them all, Pete, say hello to them all like Brett does.
There's only Box. I can only see Box.
Oh, okay.
I can only see Box here.
Oh, while I'm still on the
one there.
Obviously, Oscar's been in his suit and stuff like that, but it's a case of that they all had a bit of a send off for Seb as well, too, guys. Did we see that?
Yes, that they had.
I didn't catch it.
They had the photo. Are you talking about the photo?
Group photo at the end, and I think he really mellowed in the last year or two since he left Ferrari, didn't he? And he's just, I think he's had a different outlook on life and wants to give back to the sport and back to back to the public in general. I reckon he'll love to see him to come to Australia if he has time from family commitments and hang out. And I think there's a new respect for him across the whole world as a guy, not just as a racing car driver.
Yep. And evening to Peter McKinnon. And Red Bull has denied that they're in new talks with Porsche. I'd say that's pretty plausible, because you wouldn't want to. I don't know. You wouldn't want to go back. I don't think if you've already sort of courted and
You've run that gauntlet already, Pete, you mean?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, as it comes down, I mean, Mercedes produces cars, the Mercs, Ferrari produces cars, but like even Helmut and Christian and Adrian have said many times, they're an energy drink company that they've made a Formula One team. I mean, they've got the Infinity now, but, they started out as a energy drink company and had a go at Formula One and any other any sports around the whole world. And they've done quite success for themselves, but they count themselves as one of the big three in the world when it comes to obviously prototype.
Yeah. They're very well known for their airplane racing in the early days.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Matt Hall could attest to that. Matt Hall was one of those represented Australia there for many moons, and I think he even won. I think he won on the championship, didn't he, as well, too, guys? Does anyone recall
I think he did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and Daniel Ricciardo is returned to Red Bull, which is the worst kept secret in Formula One.
Is it a secret?
He won't be. He apparently won't be racing. He'll just be a test driver. Their reserve driver is I had it before.
I was going to say, I was discussing this with yourself and Brett on Tuesday night, weren't we, Pete? We're doing a little bit of a chin wag before our show. We had some time while the band was rehearsing. And so I asked a question to you guys, because lots of reports, including coming from Red Bull, have been not conflicting, but they're just calling it putting another mantle on it. So he's third driver or reserve driver. So, I mean, obviously he's there for promotional and his big smile, and, Adrian and him did a bit of a photo thing today. It just came out all in the press today where they're hugging and chatting and they're all friendly, and it's great to, I'm home again, that sort of stuff. So look up the links for that. But so, Pete, could you explain whether it's third driver or reserve driver and what his role is?
I think his role is going to be, he's going to be pretty much in the simulator and testing, and for marketing and promotional. I think my opinion is he's there because I think there's trouble in paradise. With Max and Sergio. So I think he's there as a backup. But
he's shaky, hasn't it been?
Yeah, but so if that goes really, really pear-shaped, he's there that they can just slot him in. But he's also saying that being in a top team, it'll help him to get a drive for 24. He said he doesn't really want to drive next year, but this will help him keep in the door and
well, look at the opportunities a couple of others have had. I mean, Alonso didn't come back through a team. He came back in his own right because of on merit. But a couple of them, like that have been lingering around, they've had themselves as reserve drivers. You've got Hulkenberg, who's been reserve drivers for teams, and he's got a full-time gig in. You've got what's his name again? So there's a couple of them. Who's Hulkenberg's Haas co-pilot next year?
Max Magnussen,
Kev
Magnussen.
Kev Mags, had a bit of a stint out as well, too, and he's got a chance again through just opportunity as well, too. And who was it? Esteban Ocon had a season out many years ago as well, too, 2019 or whatever it was, before he jumped back in a seat again for another team. So, look, if you're keeping your foot in the door, and that's what obviously Daniel's been smart enough to do all this time, and it's saying since he and McLaren and Zach were going to part ways, he's always been looking, and probably the patience has been probably the value of it, because he's been linked to about 5 teams as reserve driver or doing something in some way, shape or form for him, even if it was just as an outside option in another category. So to get back to one of the top 3 teams, I mean, the Merc rumor was the same. It's good on him, and basically at Red Bull of all places, he's going to be feel more welcome than anywhere else, isn't he, guys?
Yeah. And the Supercars calendar is released for next year. Sorry,
controversy.
No Winton and no New Zealand, but they're saying New Zealand will be back in 2024, probably most likely, I would say, at Hampton Downs. But no Winton. How do we feel about that?
Well, just on the 2 things you said first, on the New Zealand one, just to said, apparently the word on the street, and it's coming from a lot of different ways on the Hampton Downs one or wherever it be, they're actually waiting for the government to get behind it and maybe tip in a few of few chips into the system. I don't mean that derogatory. I love New Zealanders. We've got great mates in that, but they've got their accent and they bag us for ours as well too. But they're waiting for some moolah over there in New Zealand to chip in and some sponsorship and get a whole package together before they commit to any racetrack or like that. Winton, there's look, it's a great track. There's a lot of it's central. There's a bit of criticism for the crowd sometimes there. The size of it's not that good and so forth. But as you just said, Pete, they're gonna use them for testing facilities and they're gonna get multitude of use. More. Good evening, Knackers.
And Paul is saying Winton probably loses money on having the circus in town. Yes, it probably does, but it doesn't help that they hold it in the middle of winter.
Good point. But
but I'm pleased.
50% chance of rain, isn't it, Pete?
Yeah, there was good evening, SB. There was a talk that they would substitute Winton for Queensland Raceway, and I'm glad they haven't done that, because as much as Tony Quinn's doing upgrades and everything, that track is very boring, I think.
Yeah, and too soon. Maybe I'm sure there's been some sort of consultation with Tony. He's well respected within the paddock, whether in different categories. I mean, remember the Porsches and the supercars basically run side for 3/4 of the year. So Tony's a bigger contributor and he's well respected. So I'm sure, not necessarily Sean Seymour, who I think who's leaving soon as well too, already has left to a certain extent. But I'm sure that there's been some consultation and Tony's probably just said, look, it's not quite ready yet. Maybe not this year. Give me something the following year, and we can land it. So, but I think you've touched on New Zealand and Winton, but I think the biggest outcry I think I've seen so far has been no Phillip Island. So the war still continues with the ocean views.
I think, and hello, Brett.
Evening all. Sorry I'm late.
I think
we thought you'd be going on one of those guided ghost tours around the city right now.
Yeah, it was a bit like that. Although it was
good point.
Sorry, I shouldn't have done that.
Yes, that's okay. Knackers is cool.
It could have been a guided ghost tour around RMIT, but anyway, it's another story. Anyway, let's...
And as Peter McKinnon's saying, there will be. I mean, Winton is always a good race. As much as they hold it in winter and it's as cold can be, it always is a good race. So there will be a lot of people annoyed.
There's pros and cons. There's obviously access to the track's very difficult. It always has been. The locals hate that part, and also the people that are trying to facilitate the event always, whinge and moan about how hard it is to get in and get out, even if it is staggered. But look, I think SB just said a minute ago, or someone just said a minute ago about how it costs money. I don't think the local establishments, whether it be hotels, cafes, bars, or that, they'd probably look at it in a different context. It's like the Australian Grand Prix. The government tips in the money, which costs us millions of dollars, but at the same time, what it generates around the whole local area for the LGB, whatever the local government LGB areas, it's immense. So it's obviously a tenfold probably increase around the area. So look, it's just unfortunate, but look, they have still given them testing and open access, and the Benalla Club up there, they'd still have a multitude of events throughout the whole year. It's not going to miss out for sure.
Well, I think they've got a TCR round, an ARG round up there, and they do a lot.
Well, that's the other thing about
they've got their Rose.
While we're on it, Pete, did you see also though too that it's all linked to a certain extent, but did you see the supercars, as you said, release their calendar, and someone had to move their event immediately?
Yeah, for Sandown. That's a good thing. Anyway. Yeah, they had to move it because the Sandown 500 is coming back, which is a good thing. I don't subscribe to the theory that the reason that we had so much carnage at Bathurst was because we didn't have Sandown as a lead-up, because last year we didn't have Sandown as a lead-up, and we never had that carnage. Admittedly, they did.
The co-drivers not getting a gig, getting a much time track space. Yeah.
Admittedly, last year they did go to Bathurst and have a 500k race at the beginning of the year, but I think we just need another endurance race back, just because endurance racing is a better spectacle, I think.
For sure. And also there was people, a bit of a support to say that the last couple of days saying that everyone prefers a 3-day event rather than a 2-car event as well too, Pete.
Yep. And this is your wheelhouse, Doc, but Remy Gardner saying he's happy to be off the KTM.
Oh, couldn't happen sooner for the poor young fella. Oh, he's not as young as he used to be, but he's a start of his 20s now. But yeah, he's just had a tumultuous. I mean, it's a bit like it's not. Can't compare it to Formula One, to the whinging and complaining that's been going on to a certain extent. They've got better PR managers at different levels of motorsport, but yeah, the KTM and Remy have times probably, especially for the second half of the season, haven't been afraid to put their thoughts and views out there and put them out in public, whether it be interviews or through social media platforms. Which, I mean, some of them they probably regret if they take a moment or take a few days to have a think about. But because while Remy's dad, Wayne's always been outspoken. I mean, there's no holes barred there. He's Brett and I can go way back for decades, as you say, Pete. It's our thing, and Wayne's never been afraid to say something, especially when he was driving Commodores there for a certain time. He got a slap over the wrist at times. So, yeah, I mean, that's good. I mean, hopefully he gets back on his feet, and whatever way he goes back to next, which is probably World Superbikes next year, it looks like he gets back on his feet and gets his confidence, and he may not ever get go through the turnstile of MotoGP ever again. But yeah, it's certainly not worked out the best way it possibly can. But look, he can still have a fantastic, brilliant career and enjoy the motorsport, and hopefully he's not lost to the whole world.
Yeah, well, he's confirmed for the World Superbikes next year for Yamaha, so he'll be on the grid at Phillip Island, and already there's a few people, in the Superbikes world are saying we think he's going to be probably better suited to Superbikes than he was to MotoGP just by his build. Apparently, he's pretty large for a bike rider. They said he'll be more comfortable having something that he can sort of throw around a bit more and that's a bit heavier. And
underneath him too, Brett.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see how well he fares there. But unfortunately, it all fell to pieces for him. But in terms of KTM, but there was obviously more went on behind the scenes that we don't know about, because he's saying he's not 100% sure what went wrong, and the team's saying that they're not 100% sure what went wrong. The one thing everybody agrees on is that it went wrong.
Yeah, they've both taken a bit of a half a step back on at least the criticism, and there's no blame game going on as well now too. So yeah, that's Knackers. Thanks for the comment down the bottom there. That's my comment at the thing there. There's a cat, a duck, and friends over there at the Bend this weekend. There's also a bit of GT racing going on too behind the scenes. I saw Windcups stepping into and throwing a few Ks around the. I'm not sure what circuit they're using. It's a full 7-point-something K or the shorter one. But yeah, he's already done a promo video this afternoon. I had a quick look at that. Jack's wrapped to be back in Australia, and he'd be loving his holidays this year, because we've congratulated him early this year. He's married now, and he's not that far. South Australia's not that far from his hometown back over up in Queensland. It's a quick flight, even though those are $700 for the cheapest flight this weekend, even if you're going one way.
I think he can afford it.
Yeah. Well, he's on a KTM next year, and they haven't got a shortage of a budget. They're still selling motocross bikes most around the world. They're one of the biggest, the big top 5 in motocross bikes these days. So
cars as well.
Yeah, a few expos out there.
Yeah, so they've got the GT2 and the GT4 crossbows out there. So they're
there's been a lot of talk on Bathurst 12 hour this week, so we might even see a crossbow again at the 12 hour next year.
Yeah, well, they've opened up to GT2 cars, so we might see. I mean, we've already seen a couple of GT4 versions, but apparently they have opened the field up to and encouraging more GT2 cars. So we could see the KTM GT2, but we could also see we might also see the Brabham as well. The Brabham, what is it, BT62 or whatever it is? That's
64 they might be up to now, I think.
Yeah, that's there's a few of those racing in GT2, and GT2 is interesting. If you have a look at some of the stuff, if you go into GT World and have a look at some of those GT2 races, they're much closer to road going standards, but they're actually as almost as quick as a full-blown GT3 car, because they don't have all the restrictions on them just to slow them down. So they're pretty cool. The racing's pretty good.
Just before we lose Knackers below me here, thanks for the heads up. I almost forgot about the Supercross up in Newcastle. That'll be beautiful, absolutely sensational weather for that, and I'll be checking up for the updates on that on MC News or along the way there. So Knackers, thank you. You're not going anywhere this weekend. You usually got some sort of map on your posts each week and telling us where you've been told to go.
Yeah, the Adelaide Rally this weekend. Lowndesy having a steer of the Formula One the Arrows Formula One car, so that'll be fun for Lowndesy. They're still. I'm hoping they're going to have everything finished because they're running well behind with the construction. The weather over there, I mean, because it's been pretty much as bad over there as it has been here. And they were saying the other day that they were really struggling to get through and get the damn thing finished.
I believe they've reassured everyone that it's on track. And
well, speaking of late, I did see a very urgent emergency post only an hour or two ago, even for Challenge Bathurst. they're still struggling to get officials and marshals and flaggies and all that sort of jazz up there at the moment. So they said that late this afternoon, if you could, anyone who has any qualification experience, please get in contact with them, even if they can only do a day or something in the next over the weekend, to get in contact with them. They're really short. So to be on a Thursday afternoon and asking for people to participate on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they're getting pretty desperate.
Well, it was something we raised with Eugene Arocca when he was on the show, and Eugene was saying they were having a meeting fairly soon, and because with a whole bunch of people to try and decide, to try and find out ways that they could make it more accessible, more attractive to people, particularly young people, to get involved. And they were saying, like, certainly they're going to have a big push at the Grand Prix next year, as Eugene was saying, they're going to have sort of QR codes all around the place saying, hey, do you want to get the best seat in the house just for free, and scan this QR code and you could be here next year as an official marshal. But the problem is they don't have any problems getting. Well, I don't think they have any problems. I mean, Paul would know better, but as far as I know, they don't have too many problems getting people for the Grand Prix and for the Bathurst 1000 and that sort of thing. But what they do have trouble with are just average meetings. And when there's a whole bunch of them on, I mean, you've got Phillip Island this weekend with Island Magic. You've got people they were desperately looking for people down for Geelong. You've got Challenge Bathurst on as well. I think there might even be something on at Winton as well. So it's a very
drags are on Friday night, which would take a few people up for roll racing, and the drags at Calder Park, and Heath gets
you got again. Yeah, you got two drag racing events, so Calder Park and Heathcote, both running on a Friday. The roll racing, which is interesting, running out at Calder Park, and then you've got sort of more traditional drag racing happening out at Heathcote. And Heathcote's got things like almost virtually every weekend now. They're heavily booked up. So there's certainly demand for it.
Just go on the roll racing before we leave that topic, and I'll just touch on something we can expand on a little bit more if anyone else wants to add. We had Alistair on Darchie with us on the show tonight in about 35 minutes time, and I was lucky enough. I was doing some of the production crew stuff beforehand before we went to air, so I didn't really have a pre-talk or a chat with Alistair, but. We were just talking behind the desk after we cleared the show, and we were talking about the roll racing incidentally. And he said that, look, it's obviously taking off here in Australia, and it's a new concept and lots of fun and something different. And, it's more for the spectators. He said, but it is providing a few more crashes, because I mentioned about the thing we chatted with a few weeks ago when I brought up about the Hurricane that was roll racing up at Sydney Motorsport Park there a few weeks ago, and he put into a wall. And Alistair said, well, he's been keeping an eye on the situation too with it around the traps, and because he's with the Mark Sports Car Club, and he said there's a few expensive cars that are paying the price of this new roll racing and not been able to. So, there's no training for it. There's no guidance for it. It's just go out there and have a bit of fun, and they're losing control of their cars and banging them up bad.
Well, apparently the attraction of it is, basically it's similar to a rolling start in circuit racing, in that it takes strain off of the drivetrain. A lot of the cars that are running are sort of not your traditional sort of muscle cars, your Commodores and your Falcons and your Monaros and that sort of thing. They are things like Audis and Hurricanes and Ferraris, Porsches, all of the sort of GT and Mark Sports cars that are out there, really sort of like getting out there and having a really good go at it. But I mean, the thing is, I mean, if they go through at 40, the idea is they go through at 40 k's an hour. In theory, they hit the start line, almost virtually at the same time. The light goes green, and then it's just basically a drag race from there. But obviously, because they've got the rolling start. That's part of the attraction. Is the speeds, the top end speeds are a little bit higher than perhaps they might be with a traditional standing start in drag racing. So also the fact that they're not fully preparing the track at Calder. This is the thing. I mean, Calder Park, they're not putting VHT down. I mean, they are putting rubber down, I believe, but they're not putting VHT down because Calder Park management don't want VHT down because for some bizarre reason they sort of concentrating on getting circuit racing back there, which they've announced this. They announced yesterday. Well, only one that's confirmed, and that's going to be the AASA, and that's because the AASA.
There's a calendar with another one on it already.
Yeah, but that's not. Well, it's to be confirmed, and that's a Motorsport Australia event, and nothing will happen unless they get a Motorsport Australia license. And when I was speaking to Rowan Harmon the other day from Calder Park, he was saying that they were still waiting on the report on exactly what they had to do. But the word going around is that it's going to be to get up to Motorsport Australia specifications. There's going to be an awful lot of work has to be done out at Calder Park, and the way sort of Rowan was saying it was Rodney and Kim's thing is that it's going to be a steady development. It's not they're not going to go crazy. It's just going to be as things go along, they will slowly but surely improve things. But
if the government branches gets lands in their lap, they won't complain about that either.
Well, Rodney's publicly saying that they don't want government. He's saying we haven't applied for government money. We don't need. But I find that hard. I find it hard to believe when there's, especially when it looks like we're going to get the announcement. Now it's almost certainly going to come on this week. Mark Fogarty on the Parked Up podcast was saying that the word going around is that any announcement on the new motorsport complex to be built down at Avalon is basically been put on hold until after the election, because I think they were a bit concerned that it could become a bit of a political hot potato in some of the marginal seats in the West. They're having a bit of a struggle.
Money on motor racing instead of all the big problems of cost of living and healthcare in life.
Yeah, although it's interesting that if you look at and Pete would have seen, because I know he gets Auto Action regularly. If you have a look at the letters section in Auto Action, in the last the outgoing minister for sport there has written. Yeah, he's written a letter to Auto Action saying, "Hey, this is not a political adder, but hey, we have really to put a lot of money into car racing, and there's more to come, guys. Just saying." Yeah, like Paul's saying, no prep drag racing does seem popular in the state. I think that's the thing that they're going on at the moment is if you have a look at
Nine Russia gets a good flagging as well though too. What's Triple B got down there? Let's have a look. What's he say, Pete?
Any comments? Macau GP in support events last weekend. Short races with yellow flag or 2 per race. I did not know too many of the drivers, but did improve on my knowledge of the Chinese language.
Yeah, Macau throws up. I mean, it is one of the world's great circuits, but it is like incredibly. It's one of those events like Monaco that if you sort of if you went to the FIA nowadays and said, "Hey, we want to run a street race around the streets of Macau," they'd look at it and say, "Don't be ridiculous. Are you insane?" But they do it, and the bikes were back this year too, and thankfully no one died this year, because usually, it was almost like the Isle of Man. Almost every year they had the bike Grand Prix. There was a fatality somewhere. I think the year we were there were 3. There were 3 deaths. Yeah, it's just there's no runoff areas. They go around that bend onto the main straight, absolutely flat chat. If they lose it there, they go straight into a concrete wall.
There were still some significant crashes. They managed to clear them. It took about sometimes half 4 laps of an 8-hour race. I was watching with one of them at one stage. But thank you, Brett. Can also a round of applause, a metaphoric round of applause for Brett, who posted up a link for a stable one at first, but let's just not go into the reliability of the source. And then you found the official one afterwards and got that, and that was great to just put the tablet on the ground and do some work around the house. So, but look, there was some great engaging racing, and even though it's such a tight circuit and corner and free flowing in some spots, it still made some thrilling racing. Especially there was the GT race we were discussing the other night. The first lap and the last lap were just immense. It was great.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much like Bathurst, is that you don't really get the impression on television, particularly of the height change. I mean, the funniest thing that we went to Macau, like before we went back to the Grand Prix, we were in Hong Kong, and we just said, hey, let's just grab the ferry over to Macau and have a look around. And we went to, there's a museum, a Grand Prix museum over there, and we thought, well, let's go to the Grand Prix museum. But we got off and we said, hey, let's go for a drive around the track. So we jumped in a taxi and sort of explained to the guy, who had very limited English, that we wanted him to drive us around basically the Grand Prix circuit. And he wasn't sure at first and then eventually it clicked. Well, not only did he drive us around the Grand Prix, but he was almost on two wheels, and we're just we're sitting in the back of this Macau taxi, sliding back and forwards on the bench.
You're on Mexican wife.
Yeah, while this guy is sitting there going, he's good, yeah, you're good.
Yeah.
You're right, yeah.
He's still telling that story for the rest of his life now, Brett.
We gave him the biggest tip that I think he'd ever had in his life, probably. Yeah. We just got out there and Melissa said, I don't care how much, whatever we've got in our wallets, we're giving it to this guy.
Yeah, I know. It's good when you get a taxi driver in Melbourne and they realise the concept of what you're actually trying to do sometimes when they finally trust you on directions. I go, I've learned something new tonight. Google Maps doesn't know everything. So anyway,
you just don't realise how steep it is, though. That area up the back, when they come out of Lisboa and sort of start heading up the top, it is very, very similar to Mount Panorama. It's like you look down and you think, by God, it's a long climb up here, and you don't realise just how high it is up there, but it's very, very narrow, and that's why they nowadays they put in like a permanent yellow flag at the hairpin, because they used to go through and they used to actually race and try to outbrake it, and you had massive traffic jams. The best one was when they had the Group A there, and they had Walkinshaw's Jaguars out there, and the Jags pretty much had to do a 3-point turn to get round the bloody thing. It was it's a strange. I've got 2 hours of material from the Macau Grand Prix. I mean, it's the funniest.
We haven't found it yet. We've got 16 more boxes to go at Brett's garage yet. We've managed to be able to sift through 4 of them. And I've got a couple.
I've got a couple. Roy is with us, virtual R.
Yes.
He was. I had a couple of tapes that are marked Macau. Now I don't know whether it's the stuff that we shot or whether it's the footage that they supplied us, because we actually had the Australian rights to the Macau Grand Prix for several years because no one else wanted them, and so they said, well, you might as well have them, and we signed a contract and we had it. In fact, if you go back, if it's the race itself, we might put it up again, because it's interesting, because basically sitting where I'm sitting now was Richard Crail, who you all know from like as your commentator on pretty much everything that sort of Neil Crompton doesn't do, and Crailey was sitting like here in this very room there doing the commentary on the Macau Grand Prix, because I knew he was a big Formula 3 fan, and I told him that we were going to run it, and he went, I'd love to do it, and love to. And I said, if you're in Melbourne, do you want to call the thing? He said, I'll fly over. And he did. He came over especially to come here and sat here and called off the screen here for the Macau Grand Prix. So it'd be interesting if we find that. And there were a number of Earl Bamber. We had interviews with Earl Bamber. We had interviews with a few people there. But anyways, great event. But unfortunately, running for Chinese Formula 4 at the moment, and not. I hope that eventually they'll get back to running the regional Formula 3.
That was great to watch. We don't get the opportunity if you're not specifically at a track with the limited events that we have around, even Australia, let alone around the world, for Formula 4s, and get to see them there. Going sideways around the few corners and squirreling a little bit was quite fun to see the Formula 4s. They're a lot more agile when you see them in the flesh, but it was great to see. Just a quick one, Virtual R just reminded me, because congratulations to Roy. He was talking to Brett and I about a week ago, and I think he's reserved a spot up there at Bathurst for the 12-hour next year. G'day, Roy. Thanks. Hello. Good evening. And thanks for your support as usual. Who does? We will especially be hopefully catching up with Roy in the next few weeks after we finish our season for In Pit Lane for the year. Brett will just elaborate a little bit more on our last show, I'm sure, before we finish up. We've still got 25 minutes. So, but I did hear a little whisper, and this comes from a private group I'm with, that we still might see a McLaren at the 12-hour next year, which is, unfortunately the Bentleys won't be coming over from the UK. Hopefully we'll get a privateer one there. We'll get a McLaren there. If we can have a dog in every race, a horse in every race of each of the thoroughbreds, that would be fantastic.
Well, the good news is, from a Porsche point of view, is Manthey, who are legends in GT racing, particularly at the Nürburgring. I mean, they've won so many races at the Nürburgring over the years. They're on their way. The car is officially, it's already, as they said, it's in the shipping container now. It should be on the boat, and sort of hopefully we'll be heading here, and hopefully it gets here in time with any other cars that are coming over. So it'll be.
I'm might be getting a guided tour of the garage already too. So stay in touch with Pit Lane and the post down the track. I'm on the A list to get a guided tour of their garage when they're over.
Well, there you go. So so that'll be good. That'll be good if it happens. If we get some more internationals there's a lot of internationals want to come. I heard with on the Marshall Pruitt podcast, they were talking with a number of sort of leading GT3 competitors around the world, and pretty much all of them were saying well, one thing we haven't done yet that we really do want to do is Bathurst and the 12 hours. So it's got it's still a huge attraction for a lot of teams and a lot of drivers out there. It's just that at the moment it's so expensive for them to get here, and it's so uncertain that Stefan Mattel is pretty much
are cheap again. Shipping containers, you can get them for about half the price you could 6 months ago, or pre-pandemic prices. But try and get some flights for a cheap. It's going to be try and fly a person here. That's crazy still.
Yeah. So anyway, let's see what happens. But it should be a good thing. I was hoping to go up. I don't think I'm going to make it now, unfortunately. But it was it's looking like it'll be coming back to normal again. So that'll be fantastic. But certainly looking at the camping, the camping is almost booked out. It's certainly the paddock. When I looked when I went to, I think it was last Wednesday, they went on sale, and by Sunday there were 8 spots left in the paddock, and they were down to sort of 16 or 18 in the other areas as well. So camping up there is really big, and it looks like there's going to be a good crowd for the 12-hour, which is fantastic.
Thanks for the mention there, Mad Cow Mark and Pete, for putting it up. You're welcome to come over for a beer, Mad Cow, anytime if you want, and go through the toy boxes, as it's been called by one of my club members. So, however, Bathurst 12 hour, it's going to be absolutely brilliant. And what was the other? There was a couple of other little tidbits of news I had about that, because it's all been the rage the last week, obviously, since they've released that it's happening again and international and all that sort of jazz. But it's going to be absolutely brilliant. Oh, that's right, the crowd, yeah. So. Apparently, they're looking forward to the last respectable one that they had when everything was still going as per normal back at the start of 2020 was 42,000. So if they get anywhere in the range between 42 to 50,000, which is still really comfortable from sure Knackers and Roy and a few of the other guys, and Triple B, probably yourself, and Giuseppe when he's on sometimes, and Christian, our friends, and everyone who's been there. 50,000 is not crowded for a Bathurst. No way, shape, or form. You have got plenty of food, plenty of room, plenty of beverages to drink. So get up there, and plenty of camping as well too, as long as it's dry and not hailing or snowing, like Bathurst can do at the top of the mountain. And it could be absolutely 40 degrees and sunshine at the bottom.
Yeah, sometimes in the same day. I mean, the last time I camped out there, it was it blew a gale for 4 days straight. It's a wonder the tent managed to hold up, because it was.
Oh, you were in somebody else's tent by the end of the 4 days, weren't you?
It was pretty much like that. You'd sort of walk out, and suddenly you see this tent sort of flying through the air and going, or you'd see it fly in the air, and you go, "Oh, I hope that's not my tent." And you go back and go, "Oh, thank God." But it was wild. It was wild weather. It was on one day it was 43 degrees, and then in the afternoon a storm hit, and it was torrential rain, blew a gale. But that's Bathurst. It's about the only place in the world that I would really like to camp, because I can
highly recommend either to stop off before you go, or when you get there, and make time. drop into Ray's Outdoors or Anaconda and buy some heavy duty of those tent pegs, because if you don't need them just for your own sleeping arrangements or if anyone's with you, I have been there obviously a few times now, as Brett can attest, lately, and including this year. If you put those nice gazebos, the fold-up ones and the portable ones, and some of them are pretty strong as well, though, too. You put them up the top of the mountain, and everyone is there usually probably at the start of the week, as early as Mondays and Tuesdays. They get access, and they decide they put their tents. They don't necessarily put the coverage on the top. They don't put the material, but they put the frames up, and then they bolt them down so that they can't move, because they want to reserve their spot for the end of the week. So if you've got yours bolted there, no one else can take that spot. So heavy duty tent pegs are the rage, and they're very popular.
Yeah, I believe I went through the tent pegs that came with my tent they absolutely just bent and were destroyed. There was no getting them into the ground there. So I went and got some heavy duty ones. They didn't go in. So I think the tip that I've been given is to get the screw in ones, or just to get some coach bolts, some sort of 12mm coach bolts from Bunnings, and take the power, the impact driver there, and bolt them into the ground, because it is like rock there. I mean, it's like it's very much compressed, and it was really hard. I broke pegs, I bent pegs, I broke a hammer, and once I got them in, I couldn't get the bloody things out. I had to sort of wedge them out with a huge long pry bar to get the bloody things out. And
you need a bobcat to drag the things out. Anyway,
yeah.
So this weekend it's Island Magic and the Porsches is going down to the wire.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? This is the first time that they've sort of added to Island Magic for a while, because they lost a few of the traditional categories that they had in the past, including things like HQ Holden's prioritised their racing up at Winton, the 3-hour race. They prioritised that, so they're not there in the big numbers, and they had a few spots. And thankfully, there was a round cancelled of the Sprint Cup, the Michelin Sprint Challenge, and so they're going to run that. So that'll be a good
Courtney will be slapping you on the wrist when you keep on changing the names around, Brett.
Yeah, so but yeah, Courtney will be. I think she's still in contention for that third place after the last round at Mount Panorama. But yeah, it's going down to Thomas Sargent and I forget who's the second place there. It is down there somewhere, but yeah. So
Macca's has been doing the Monash.
Yeah, they've been sort of rolling past here. They'll be down there tomorrow. Unfortunately, now as far as I know, there's no live stream. I haven't seen anything. I might be wrong, but I've seen no mention of any live stream of the event at all. And then, of course, as we point out tonight on the news, across the other side of the bay, we've got the Geelong Revival kicking in, and that's got a huge entry. Coming up, they've got the Matt Mingay and the Hot Wheels stunt team are going to be there. So hopefully, keep our fingers crossed.
Transporter was on social media and is in place already down there. It is.
Yeah, so that'll be good. They'll get a big crowd. If it's a fine day, they'll get a big crowd down there. I mean, because they
fashions as well too, and some show and shine trophies and
food trucks and. Yeah, very expensive. Food trucks, which is your opportunity to pay $22 for something you could buy across the road for $9.99 from the local fish and chip shop. But anyway, whatever, it's all part of the attraction apparently. And
Porsche Melbourne have committed themselves again as well too. So they were a big feature early in the year when Brett and I were there, and Zach Suter took his TCR car down, which he will be unable to be in two places at once this weekend. However, because he's got other commitments, I actually might be there. I can't remember. I have to look that up again. But yeah, Porsche Melbourne have just committed the Transporter and putting a showcase of cars on, it was really good. They put a bit of a cavalcade on, didn't they, Brett, of all the different years and all the different models all the way up to the EV, didn't they, last time?
Yeah, and as the fastest time of the day on the curved quarter mile there along Eastern Beach went to the went to the all-electric Porsche with Nick McBride behind the wheel. So it'll be interesting to see if somebody can beat the electric cars there. I know there'll be a few people trying, but
if anyone wants to catch up with Nick, he was on the show earlier this year with us as well, later, and sat down and talked to us. So jump on YouTube on the in-pit lane, and Nick was great and was very forthright with his experiences with Porsche and very down to earth and a great guy to hang out with.
Yeah, so he'll be down there. So that'll be a good thing. And if you want to, there are VIP areas and areas in the pits where you've got to pay money. But if you just want to go along and sit on, if it's a nice day and you just want to sit on the banks at Eastern Beach and just look down over the track and look across onto the bay area and the marina, you can do that for nothing. Parking is always a hassle there, as we well know. But if you can find a place to park, it's a good cheap day out, and it'll be it's a lovely event. It's just a shame that it clashes with Isle of Magic. As it turns out, I'm not going to either of them, but anyway, that's unfortunate.
Speaking of parking, Brett, you and I took Rex down early this year, and we found a little spot there in an industrial area that was quite convenient to park. It wasn't too far a walk. So search around the streets there. If you head further down, not the Ferris wheel end, not towards the port end where the TT lines run their Tassie trips now, but go the opposite end, further down towards the circuit, which I do a little bit of football and cricket and stuff like that from times. Actually, I went past last weekend. I was on the way to Port Arlington to a wedding, and I drove past the circuit and had a look to the left. If you look on the circuit end, it doesn't have any restrictions as well too. There's a big tip, and tell your mates about that. So if you are going to Geelong or someone is, parking is actually restricted around the city, the CBD part. Go a little bit further up. It's only a couple of blocks sometimes. It's an easy walk, no restrictions, and there's usually plenty of parking up the circuit end. So I've experienced that as well, though, too, because they have some excellent Ironman competitions there and triathlons I've been a part of it from time to time. And it's a great area as well, too. As Brett said, overlooking down the track, you can't get a bad spot.
Actually, according to SB, the Blendline is covering Isle of Magic on the weekend. So I hadn't seen anything written down anyway. Certainly nothing that Pyark have put out gave any indication of that. But anyway, so they're going there. So if you're not going down and you want to catch up with some of the action on the weekend, including the 50k plate and the Matthew Flinders Cup and the Formula Open, the open wheelers, and it's a good field of open wheelers too, an interesting field of open wheelers. Old Formula 2 cars, Formula 3 cars, a few Formula 4s, Formula Toyotas from the New Zealand series, whole bunch of things that sort of do. This is Tim Macro's put this together, and it's just basically a whole bunch of sort of orphaned open wheelers that basically, were very fast but had nowhere to actually run. So some of the later Formula Holdens are not eligible for historic racing. So yeah, this just gave them a place where they could race. Well, and it's good.
We've been trying to catch up with Tim and get him on the show, and Brett and I speak to him at the track from time to time, but obviously not enough. He's a hell of a guy, and he's turned himself into the great local ultimate ambassador for this event. So hopefully it keeps on going that particular way. I'm glad you touched on the open wheeler subject too, which we haven't mentioned yet, but I did see a little tidbit in
the power cut.
Social media. Sorry.
The power cut for the S5000.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, 15 cars are going to field this time. They've got a full field, so I don't know where everyone. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Also, there's an engine cut, isn't there?
What? Sorry,
isn't there an engine? The cut to the power of the engines for
Adelaide? They've taken power out of the engines, and I'm not sure whether that's a sort of a Motorsport Australia thing, whether that's something that they want to make sure that everybody finishes. In amongst those 15 drivers, of course, is Giancarlo Fisichella, former Ferrari Formula One driver.
Is he as he's affectionately known?
Yeah, so he will, and he's another one who has said that, he said, I want to come back for Bathurst. I want to do Bathurst. That's very important. But he's certainly over there. But yeah, it's interesting that they're actually pulling, they're making the things slower, and I don't know, as I said, where they're going. And as you can see on the bottom ticker as well, when it comes through, the news today that Barry Rogers has now bought further into the Australian Races Group. He now owns 75% of that organisation now. So that's interesting. So a major commitment from Gary Rogers Motorsport on the sort of doubling down on the future of those categories, such as S5000, TCR, TA2, and a few of those other categories.
Well, I mean, it's gonna be tough, and look, it's the old. There's both sides of the story, and lots of to and from. But obviously, Channel 7 have announced this week as well too about the free-to-air coverage as well of the supercars races next year, and what Porsche and Murdoch has let them have and what hasn't let them have. And I think it's a total of 7 races.
6.
And 6, is it? 6, okay.
Not including Sandown 500.
Sorry, yes, and that was where it is. But look, all it did was just bring up about 300 people keyboard having a go, saying the argument for and against as usual. And however, the problem, so it's not changed to a certain extent. But yeah, at least we can be grateful if we're busy. You can get, and you just haven't got a paywall, or you don't want to commit to an extra subscription or something like that. Because as people pointed out, cost of living is very tight at the moment. KO is $25 a month now, so it's gone up in the past 12 months. And Stan, if you want to watch the other stuff, you've got to have, as Brett's pointed out many a time, you've got to have the double subscriptions.
I quit KO just the other day because basically once the last round of Formula One sort of happened, it was just there was no point in me sort of hanging around because all the tests are on free to air television. A lot of the Sheffield Shield is on Cricket Australia's television channel, so no real reason to keep it up, so I got rid of it. And I might sort of sometime when Formula One gets back to Europe next year, I'll probably fire it up again. And but it's expensive.
They're all throwing out deals. I mean, I'm with Telstra and they threw 3 months.
Yeah. Just box. Don't tell me that because I wouldn't pay the extra money. I'm not eligible to buy tickets till next Tuesday, so don't tell me.
It looks like grandstand tickets are virtually sold out on pre-sale. You need to be very quick. Well, that's no good. Yeah, that was going to be a foregone conclusion. I think that but Naka's just said before, they're always still struggling to get 100% for flaggies down there. Just back to the subscription thing. I mean, I bought my ground pass. I'm not a massive fan, but I love my tennis and go to it each year, etc. like that. I bought my ground pass this afternoon, which is just a Friday ground pass for $60 odd. And I got a month free subscription to Apple TV on the house out of it as well too. So they're all
that's interesting.
They're all trying to get you on board for something to get you a 12-month, at least a month earlier.
I had a 1-year subscription when I bought the computer that's here. I had a 1-year subscription to Apple TV, and I never watched a single second of it because I couldn't find anything at all that even remotely interested me on it. It was like, I wonder what's on here. No, not interested in that. Not interested in that. Same with Prime. I didn't know that I'm a member of Amazon Prime. And I didn't know until sort of, about 3 weeks ago that I was a member of Amazon Prime. And I could have been watching all this stuff on Amazon. But I sort of went around and had a look and went, oh, yeah, if I get time. But, who has the time to sit in front of television? Television is for being on, not for watching.
Television is for sitting on the couch trying to get some sleep and some background noise. Unless it's racing.
Well, that's what podcasts are for.
Very good. Well, we've got 4 minutes left, guys.
So, do we want to wrap it up, or
you're calling the shots, Pete? So well done. So
talk about the show tonight, please, Pete.
The show tonight has I forget his name.
Alistair Bondarchi.
Alistair Bondarchi, who's talking about come and dry day for. Doc?
Yeah, Phillip Island and the
Mark Cars.
Yeah, Mark
Sports Cars Australia Association running their come and try. So he talks to us about that. Yeah, interesting stuff too. Interesting the fact that they're pretty much booked out. I mean, they're booked out for this weekend, but they're also
88 cars.
Yeah, so I've got 88 participants for the weekend after this, because obviously Isle of Magic's this weekend, but they're down at Phillip Island the following weekend, so that's booked out. But if you're interested, you'll see the details tonight. But obviously, and he was saying that people like Tony D'Alberto and a few other sort of top names get involved and help out down there. So if you want to go down there and learn to be a better driver, and not just on the track but also on the road, but also take your road car down and see what it's capable of, then this is a way that you can do it. It's all very strictly controlled and.
Just off the cuff as well too, because you won't see it on air. When we dropped the show, finished it and cleared the decks. Alice is right. Brett, Doc, you two guys need to get in the car and come down there. You're invited. Getting there, and Brett's like, we're both like, I said, yeah, maybe, but yeah, but he did tell us if you're going to bring a car down there, which was the very most important part. Upgrade your brakes package on your cars. Because he said your car will get through one lap and then it'll be gone. It'll be toast, and you won't be able to ruck around for the rest of the day, even 150k an hour top out.
Yeah, you can certainly fry brakes. Even just coming down Lake Mountain when we did the coverage of Lake Mountain Sprint years ago, coming down Lake Mountain following a Subaru WRS in the little Getsy, and got down the bottom and went, what on earth is burning, and where's all that smoke coming from?
Somebody catch me.
Yeah, so pulled up and had a look, and there's smoke just pouring off the front discs. It's a wonder it didn't catch fire. That's just in the Gets. So I certainly.
Sorry. Continue. There's 1 minute to go before in pit lane on Channel 31 starts. So we'll say good night. Yeah.
Very
Sounds
good.
Good to me.
Channel 31.
Keep on punching.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.